What is going on in Toronto right now? Seriously, folks, if you thought the offseason was winding down, if you thought John Chayka had already dropped his biggest bombshells and that the Maple Leafs were done making noise this summer, then buckle up because I am here to tell you that the story is absolutely nowhere near over. And today we are diving deep, we are going wall to wall, on the latest Maple Leafs trade rumor that has just emerged, what it means for the franchise's immediate future, the insane roster decisions that still need to be made before training camp, and why this could genuinely be the most consequential offseason in Toronto Maple Leafs history in over a decade. If you're a Leafs fan, if you bleed blue and white, if you've been refreshing your timeline every 20 minutes hoping for news, then today's video is exactly what you've been waiting for. Stay with me because this one is a deep dive and every single second of it matters. Let me set the stage for you first because context is everything here. The Toronto Maple Leafs finished the 2025-26 NHL season 32-36-14, 8th in the Atlantic Division, and they missed the playoffs entirely for the first time since 2016. Let that sink in. A franchise built around Auston Matthews, William Nylander, and a core that was supposed to be a Stanley Cup contender, finishing dead last in their division. It was a disaster. It was the kind of season that forces an organization to look itself in the mirror and ask some really uncomfortable questions. And the answer that MLSE and the brass came up with was to blow the whole thing up from the front office down, starting with firing Brad Treliving, bringing in John Chayka as the new general manager, and naming Jim Hiller, a man who previously served as an assistant under Mike Babcock, as the 41st head coach in Maple Leafs history. That was the reset button. That was the declaration that everything was going to be different. And then Chayka got to work. Now, the moves Chayka made in the early part of the offseason were frankly stunning in their pace and their ambition. He acquired Darren Raddysh from Tampa Bay in a sign-and-trade, a Toronto area native signing an 8-year deal, stepping in as the highest-paid defenseman on the blue line. He shipped out Joseph Woll and Simon Benoit to Philadelphia and brought back Samuel Ersson, Emile Andre, and a 2026 third-round pick. He traded Nick Robertson to Pittsburgh. He acquired Nick Paul from Tampa Bay. He signed veteran depth players like Sergei Bobrovsky, and we are going to talk a lot about Bobrovsky today because that is one of the more fascinating gambles of the whole summer, along with Teddy Bluger, Colton Sissons, Jack Roslovic, Zach Maswan, and Brandon Duheim. And of course, the crown jewel of the entire offseason, selecting Gavin McKenna with the first overall pick in the 2026 NHL draft. Gavin McKenna, arguably the most hyped prospect to enter the NHL in years, is now a Toronto Maple Leaf. The future is arriving in real time, people. But here is the thing. Even with all of those moves, even with the roster looking tenfold different from how it looked at the end of last season, there is one massive storyline that has refused to die all summer long. One name that keeps coming up no matter what else happens. One situation that John Chayka has not been able to close the book on. And that name is Morgan Rielly, the longest tenured Maple Leaf. The man drafted 5th overall in 2012, a cornerstone of this franchise's blue line for over a decade. And right now, as we speak, his future in Toronto is genuinely uncertain in a way that would have seemed absolutely unthinkable just 2 or 3 years ago. Here is where the big news comes in. Reports from multiple insiders have surfaced confirming that the Maple Leafs continue to have active dialogue around Morgan Rielly and remain open to moving him. Chayka has made it clear, this has been reported explicitly, that he is not interested in giving Rielly away for free. He is not going to cave and make a bad trade. But the problem, and this is the problem that keeps bubbling up, is that every single trade offer that has come to Toronto's way so far has either asked Chayka to retain a significant chunk of Rielly's remaining contract or add a sweetener just for teams to take on his full cap hit. Rielly carries a $7.5 million cap hit and has 4 years remaining on that deal. He also submitted a 4-team trade list which carries a full no-movement clause through July of 2027, and that limits Toronto's options dramatically. You cannot just ship him to any team that shows interest. He has to approve it. He controls where he goes. And apparently, that short list of acceptable destinations has complicated the Leafs' ability to find a match. Now, what makes this even more layered, what makes this whole Rielly situation so compelling and so dramatic, is the backstory that recently came out about what happened before the 2026 trade deadline. According to NHL insider David Pagnotta writing in the fourth period, The Edmonton Oilers were aggressively trying to move Darnell Nurse last spring and actually approached the Maple Leafs with a major proposal that reportedly included Nurse, Nick Roy, and Morgan Riley as a centerpiece going back the other way. Toronto said no. Not once, reportedly at least twice. They declined those proposals on multiple occasions before Nick Roy was eventually traded to the Colorado Avalanche and the whole thing fell apart. The fact that the previous Toronto regime passed on that deal, and that Chayka's new group is now stuck trying to find a market for Riley on their own terms, that tells you everything about how complicated the situation has become. And Riley himself? He has spoken publicly. At Hockey Night in Brampton, he addressed the rumors directly and confirmed that he expects to be a Maple Leaf when the season opens. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that for him it's about staying focused and staying present, that he has enjoyed the offseason, that he has been training hard and is looking forward to getting going. He spoke about the changes in Toronto and said that when you have a down year like the Leafs had, you almost welcome change. He described his perspective as seeing this as a new opportunity. He is not acting like a man who has one foot out the door. He is acting like a man who is ready to prove something. And honestly, from a pure hockey standpoint, if Riley bounces back and approaches something close to his 2023-24 campaign where he put up 58 points in 72 games, then Chayka will have a real choice to make: hold on to him as a valuable piece of the rebuild or put him back on the market with elevated trade value heading into the 2027 deadline. Either way, the story continues. Either way, this saga is not over. But the Morgan Riley situation, as gripping as it is not the only massive roster decision hanging over this team right now. Because another huge piece of the Leafs' new identity is the goaltending tandem of Sergei Bobrovsky and Anthony Stolarz. And that is a bet worth examining extremely carefully. Bobrovsky signed a 3-year, $21 million deal to come to Toronto. He is 37 years old, turning 38 before the season starts. A 2-time Vezina Trophy winner. A future Hall of Famer. A man that Matthew Tkachuk called the backbone of the Florida Panthers team last year, even after Florida had a rough year. When Bobrovsky left for Toronto, Tkachuk said publicly that they could not afford to lose him, that he sets the tone on and off the ice, that his character, work ethic, and drive are irreplaceable. That is the level of person and player that is now in a Maple Leafs uniform. The chemistry between Bobrovsky and Stolarz is already established from their time together during Florida's Stanley Cup run in 2023-24, when Stolarz served as his backup. They know each other, they trust each other, they push each other, and according to people inside the organization, their competitive relationship for starts is going to be one of the most watched storylines when training camp opens. Speaking of training camp, let's talk about what that is actually going to look like and who is fighting for what. The locks on this roster, according to multiple reports, are fairly clear. Bobrovsky and Stolarz in net, the top 6 defensemen on the blue line, and up front, Matthews, Tavares, Nick Paul, Colton Sissons, Mitch Knies, Gavin McKenna, Easton Cowan, Jack Roslovic, and William Nylander. But there is a bubble group that is going to make things really interesting. Players like Joshua, Teddy Bluger, Brandon Duheim, Stephen Lawrence, and Zach Maswan are all competing for spots. And then there is the wild card Max Domi, who is recovering from off-season back surgery, and whose availability and readiness is a genuine unknown. If Domi comes back healthy and sharp, he could absolutely force his way into the lineup and push someone out. If he is not right, Toronto has more than enough depth to cover without him. Either way, Chayka has built something that looks significantly deeper than what we saw last year. And then there is the Gavin McKenna factor. Connor McDavid, who already knows McKenna well, has offered high praise for the kid heading into his rookie season. The expectations around McKenna are enormous, perhaps unfairly so given that he has not played a single NHL regular season game yet. But the talent is real, the hype is justified, and the Maple Leafs are genuinely entering the 2026-27 season with one of the NHL's most anticipated rookies wearing their colors. Morgan Riley himself has said he anticipates McKenna making a big presence felt at training camp. When the longest-tenured Maple Leaf is talking about the first overall pick with that kind of respect before camp even opens, you know, the energy in that building is something different. Now let's add one more wrinkle to this, because of course there is one more wrinkle. This is the Toronto Maple Leafs. There is always one more wrinkle. The Patrick Lane connection. Reports have emerged linking the former second overall pick to Toronto in a signing scenario, and the logic on paper is actually pretty compelling. Lane is a pure sniper. He is someone who, on his best days, can score goals at an elite rate. Reuniting him with Austin Matthews, who was taken first overall in that same 2016 draft, one pick ahead of Lane going to Winnipeg, would be a fascinating storyline on top of the hockey sense of it. The problem? Toronto is already bumping up against the salary cap. The Leafs are projected at roughly $106.75 million against a ceiling of around $104 million for the 2026-27 season. They are over the cap as currently constructed. They need to clear space before they can do anything else. So any Lane deal would need to be structured as a low base, bonus-heavy contract to barely dent the number up front, and Toronto would still need to create a roster spot. It is tight. It is complicated. But it is not impossible, and the fact that the reports keep surfacing suggests there might be more to this than just idle speculation. Here is the bottom line, Leafs Nation, and this is what you need to understand as we head into the final stretch before training camp. John Chayka has come into this organization and genuinely cooked this offseason. The moves have been aggressive, the vision has been clear, and the message from top to bottom is that this is not a developmental season. This is not a rebuilding season. This is a win-now team. They brought in Sergei Bobrovsky because they want to compete for a Stanley Cup right now. They signed Darren Radish to an 8-year deal because they believe in the direction of the franchise. They traded for depth pieces that bring grit and reliability to a roster that was exposed last season for not having enough of either. And they selected Gavin McKenna first overall because the future is not just coming. It is already here. But the Morgan Rielly situation is the elephant in the room that will define a huge chunk of this season's narrative. Whether he gets moved before the opener, whether he becomes a revitalized weapon in Jim Hiller's system, or whether this all drags out to the February deadline, it is going to be a storyline that follows this team every single week. And the same goes for the goaltending gamble on Bobrovsky, the bubble battles at training camp, the Lane rumors, the McKenna development arc, and the overarching question of whether this new-look Maple Leafs team is actually good enough to end the longest active Stanley Cup drought among playoff contenders. The blueprint has been drawn. The roster pieces are largely in place. The coaching staff is installed. The first overall pick is signed. And the longest-tenured Maple Leaf is saying all the right things despite a summer of relentless trade speculation. Everything is pointing toward a season unlike any other in recent Leafs history. And if you think the news cycle around this team is going to slow down between now and opening night on September 29th, well, I would not bet on it. This is the Toronto Maple Leafs. The drama does not stop. It just evolves. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because every single day between now and the start of the season, we are going to be right here covering every move, every rumor, every lineup battle, and every roster decision as it happens. Drop a comment below. I want to hear from you. Do you think Morgan really gets traded before the season starts? Is the Bobrovsky signing a stroke of genius or the biggest gamble of the summer? And is Gavin McKenna going to live up to the hype right out of the gate? Let me know. I read every comment. And until next time, go Leafs go.